Most people have been part of a team at some stage in their working lives. The team is the fundamental building block in how we collaborate, do projects, brainstorm ideas, and just generally get work done. Why then is being a team member or a team player so hard to do? Let's explore. Welcome to Talking HR Trends with Natal and Tom. I'm Natal Dank.
And I'm Tom Haak.
And we explore the latest hot topics and business challenges impacting the people side of organisations. Stick around to the end for our practical top tip. And if you found this discussion valuable, please subscribe.
So, Natal, what was the key message for you in this episode?
Key message is HR play a role in helping teams build psychological safety. Tom, what's your key message in this episode?
For me, the key message is, as a team member, always think, what can I do to make the team better?
Nice. Okay, Tom, we've talked a lot about teams as the main building block to modern organizations. So we've talked about how HR need to be more focused on teams, not just the individual. And we've even explored self-managing teams in one of our episodes. I would like to now look at the specific role that HR has around building and supporting teams in general. So how do we build teams? How do we form teams? What's our role in all of this? And what's interesting is when I started to look at this topic, there is so many models and frameworks out there about how to build a team, and the team building day, of course, is one of the main ones that we always invest in. It's the main offsite that we do. But what's really interesting is when you look at these models, a lot of them start from a kind of negative point of view. So very famous one, the Bruce Tuckman forming, storming, norming, performing predicts that we will storm when we come together as a team. Then, of course, there's Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. So it just starts with the dysfunctions rather than the positives. What's going on here? Why are all these models kind of presuming that teams are going to struggle when they come together to work as a team?
Well, I think it's based on real life.
Yes.
Many of us have been in teams, and I've probably been in hundreds of teams over my working life. And often, teams are dysfunctional, not working well. So it's based on real life. I think that people think, how is it possible that we are not doing better? And then, of course, that people go to one of the models and see how it can be done better. I grew up with Belbin.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. What were you? Were you a plant or a shaper, a shifter?
Probably a shaper. But also in Belbin, it was interesting that some roles, of course, were more popular than other roles. Who wants to be a team worker? Nobody. Maybe a resource investigator, but everybody,
Exactly.
I'm a shaper.
But I think that says something, isn't it? Because team worker is actually what you want for the team to be successful. You want everyone to be a team worker, but it's not the most attractive
No,
one.
absolutely not. Yeah.
There's something in that, isn't it? That we need to make being a team player more attractive.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do need to be more conscious of it and aware of how do we sign up to being part of a team. It's more than just us as an individual, isn't it? And there's a two-way process. We need to contribute to the team just as much as the team supports us. And one good book actually to reference here is by Heidi Helfand and her book on dynamic reteaming, the art and wisdom of changing teams. This book's quite interesting because it comes from the angle of teams will constantly change. And I think this is also a point, isn't it? That a team is never together for too long. It'll always be a new member. Someone will leave or the company changes or you'll need to move and focus on a new product. And you need to be ready for that and just be embracing that continuous change and looking at how you support that constant movement of people in and out of teams as well. So I think that's a key point.
But on the other hand, there's not enough effort to keep winning teams intact.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've been in an organization and it cost me years to build a winning team.
Yeah.
So I built a team, then finally we were there. And of course, change is inevitable. At the same time, I would have liked to take that team to another organization and say, here we are, not just Tom, but this is the team because we are effective as a team. No, but companies hired me.
Yes. Yeah.
So the effort to keep winning teams intact, I think, should also get more attention. It's hardly ever happening.
Yeah, which is a message for HR and
Yeah.
recruiters, definitely. And you sometimes see that when there's a team that's linked to a product or a certain kind of innovation kind of product or a new thing in the market, and they'll take the whole team. But it seems to be less about that team performing and more about what they do.
Well, I saw it in the insurance industry where I worked, insurance
Hmm.
broker. And
Hmm.
there, sometimes team were hired. People said, okay, their top people said, you can hire me, but with my team. It was interesting because it was also
Yeah.
very exciting to hire teams and to pull them
Yes.
away. But it's hardly ever happened. Even in sports, you don't
Mm.
see it. So single players, not teams.
Well, football is the
Yeah,
famous
yeah,
single transfer, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Yes. What I find really interesting is there's been a lot of studies, and there was quite a famous one by Google called Project Aristotle.
Hmm.
And the researchers set out to discover what makes a winning team. And they presumed it would be because they would have high performers. So a rock star team would be a bunch of high performers. But what they discovered, which of course I think we all kind of knew, was it's less about who's in the team and it's more about how they work together. And I know that throughout the years of playing sport, we would always use the mantra of you want to be a champion team, not just a team of champions. So this idea of how do you come together and really work well together? And you see this sort of argument in orchestras and things like this. How do you know your place and know your role and contribute in that way? Knowing this, what do you think is HR's role in this? How do we play a role in forming teams and developing teams, helping people work together as a team?
I totally agree. You don't need a lot of individual prima donnas. It needs to be a cohesive team. So I think there are a couple of processes we know are important for successful teams. And one has to do with a shared understanding of the goals, which is an open door, but sometimes that's not clear, and of the roles of the people. How do we staff the team? And can we be explicit about the goals of the team and the roles people are taking?
Yeah.
We discussed
Yeah.
that in self-managed teams. So staffing the teams, I think that's an element where HR can play a lot more conscious role.
I agree.
There's a lot of focus on the team leader, who is important, but how do we make a sensible team that can work together very well? I think that can get more attention.
Sometimes we're too focused on replacing the role or the skill that has left that team, as opposed to who will make this team better, who will
Yeah,
contribute
yeah,
to this team in the
yeah,
best way.
yeah.
And actually, a good team is multi-skilled, so it's more about looking at that aspect, I think. Yeah.
So it's about clear goals, clarity about the roles. It's also about conflict handling, which we already mentioned.
Definitely. Yeah.
How do we as a team go through tough times? That's where HR can also certainly play a role. Of course, team cohesion, or how do we know each other? How do we work together? And where HR can help a lot, I think, is in the review processes, the discipline for a team to reflect on how they are doing. That has to do with the retrospective, which we discussed earlier. But having the discipline to look at the team and let the team discuss how are we doing and how can we do better.
Definitely.
And also that's often said, but it doesn't get a lot of attention. There's of course there's the one day kickoff and we do something very nice, but then there we go. And how many organizations have really disciplined retrospective, not only on product, but also on team functioning?
For me, that's the basis to forming what's number one in the 5 dysfunctions of teams, which is trust, and also what came out of that project by Google, which is psychological safety. So this idea that you can take risks with your team members and be vulnerable. And that equals being able to talk about feedback, isn't it? And so I think that's such a central part. A company I've done a bit of work with, Tom, have introduced a new role called a team success partner.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a HR business partner, but they're for teams, not for sort of individuals or just sort of a function. And it's a really interesting role. And it's a type of coach. It's a type of business partner that helps around that kind of recruitment aspect and skills development. And I think we might see a bit more of this as the team becomes more of the building block to the organization. So very, very interesting role.
A simple matrix, another matrix people can work on. I think let's look at the different HR processes, recruitment, reward, development, etc. And then look at what are we doing for the team instead of for the individual.
For teams. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like that.
And we see that many of the practices are focused on the individual and not focused on the team.
Even a lot of our performance and reward is still very individual driven, isn't it? Definitely.
Another dimension I would like to mention is it's not only about one team, it's also about a network of teams. So that's another
Yeah.
element. How does a constellation of teams work? How
Yeah.
do they interact? And how do you make sure that teams can be successful? There's always good examples about a team focused on innovation. How does such a team survive in an organization that is very much focused on getting normal things done?
The teams of teams and value streams and which again is just that is modern workplace. So I think we should definitely do an episode on that one, Tom.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah.
We've talked about self-managed teams, but a lot of teams have a manager. So what's your thoughts here? Is a manager a hindrance to a team or is it vital for team success? What's your thoughts?
I think it can be both. Huh?
Yeah.
The reality is many organizations have rather traditional teams with a team leader. And we know that the role of the team leader is very important. And he or she can do a lot of things to make the team function well. So I think we should not underestimate that. Probably it's a lot more difficult to work in a self-managed team. Maybe the rewards are a little bit higher as well, but the team leaders are important if they do the right things. And often they don't.
I know, which takes me actually to another. There was another Google project, and it's the oxygen one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought that was really interesting because they went to prove that managers weren't needed, and what they discovered is that managers do play a really important role, but only if they serve the team as opposed to being the team lead. So, and so they set up this whole kind of approach where the manager constantly gets feedback on how they are serving the team. And one of them is actually explicitly saying, I do not micromanage my team members.
There's this list of 8 things, I think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that sort of feeds into this idea of the servant leader, isn't it? So how your role is actually to get others to work together effectively. It's not to actually tell them what to do. And I think that's an different dynamic to maybe how we've seen team leads or managers in the past.
Yeah, but we know, at least I know from practice, that many teams are not ideal. So there's also a role for the team member. We can sit there and complain, oh, our team leader is not very good and all the members in this team, there are some lousy members. Teams are hardly ever perfect. You have a responsibility as well. So, okay, what can we do to make this work? So it's also, even if you have a team leader and the team is not self-managed, well, it's not forbidden to manage as well.
I don't know if we do enough around our responsibilities as a team member. We look a lot about our skills, how we communicate, but maybe, we don't focus enough on how we should sort of the contract of signing up to your team as such. So I think that's something to look at.
And living with the reality of imperfection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, good theme to end on. So thank you very much, Tom. Let's look at our practical tip. And Tom mentioned it in the discussion today. And this is using a health check as a type of retrospective on a regular basis with your teams. There's so many formats on the web out there for free. You can also design your own. I've seen some companies do that. A good example is asking questions linked to Patrick Lencioni's 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And this links to what we've discussed today. So it's trust, it's having productive conflict, so the ability to talk about disagreement openly, commitment to a common goal, accountability, and attention to results. So you can put together a health check and then regularly ask these questions with the team and get them to discuss feedback. Now, the first time they do this, it might feel a bit strange, it might feel a bit uncomfortable, and there might be some hesitancy or some reluctance to share feedback with each other. So, of course, the power is doing this on a regular basis. So people do become more and more comfortable with the health check process and also talking and sharing and listening to feedback within the team. This also starts to build trust over time. And so through this health check, not only do you find things to continuously improve, but you actually build psychological safety. So it's a great tool to use in your organization. Thanks again for joining us for Talking HR Trends with Natal and Tom. If you found this discussion valuable, please subscribe. Have a great day.